Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. At this time, I will begin the Scabbard and Blade National E-Convention for 2016. Before we begin, I'd like to take a moment of silence for the victims, friends, and families of those at Lackland Air Force Base this morning. Ladies and gentlemen, will you please stand for the playing of our national anthem and the Pledge of Allegiance following. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You may be seated. Just a warning, we will take a couple breaks throughout the program for some technical adjustments, so please have patience and bear with us. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the second annual Electronic National Convention for the National Society of Scabbard and Blade. My name is Cadet Timothy McGinn, and I will be the moderator and master of ceremonies for today's event. I'm the current commander of Middle Tennessee State University's Scabbard and Blade Kilo Company of the 59th Regiment, and an MS-3 cadet in Army ROTC. This year has had a lot of expansion and growth, and I am so proud that our company could lead the planning and execution of this event on a national scale. Thank you, Kilo Company, for your tireless efforts. Before we get started, I would like to cover some ground rules for those of you who are connected with us via Google Hangouts, YouTube, live streaming. Otherwise, please follow the instructions for tech issues. Megan had sent out for you all. For all those in attendance, we ask you that you keep your computers or phones mics muted while the event is going on. For technical issues, please refer to the email Megan has sent you for all further assistance. Before we get started, I would like to give an overview of Scabbard and Blade for our guests that will be joining us today. The fast-moving changes in the military, academic, and technological environment has increased the demand on our nation's officers and have raised the standard of professionalism our officers need to achieve in order to be effective. Scabbard and Blade is committed to supporting the military and our members during this training to support the demand for more effective officers. Our goal is to help our members achieve the greatest potential through a mixture of dynamic joint military and development programs. Our programs are aimed at disseminating best practices within civilian and military professions to support our members' success and encourage new thought. We believe that today's military officer is more well-rounded than ever. Officers are expected to demonstrate many critical qualities. We capture these in our 5 stars: honor, leadership, professionalism, officership, and unity. If you have any additional questions about the organization, please contact us through our website, scabbardandblade.org. We are continually looking to expand our influence throughout the nation in every ROTC program possible. To this date, we have 26 active companies, and we are so proud to have their drive and commitment, which makes this society what it is today. At this time, I would like to welcome the National Society of Scabbard and Blade President, Lieutenant Austin Hirsch. Lieutenant Hirsch graduated from Oklahoma State University in May of 2012 with a finance degree. He was actively involved in the cadet wing and held wing commander position and numerous other cadet leadership positions. He commissioned as an acquisition officer, currently stationed in LA Air Force Base, working for Space-Based Infrared Systems Directorate. Austin is currently serving as the follow-on production ground project manager for the SBIRS ground stations. As of recently, Lieutenant Austin Hirsch has been promoted to Captain Select. He pins on in July of this year. Please welcome Lieutenant Austin Hirsch.
Thank you for the introduction, Cadet McGinn. So I'm so proud to be here. Again, this is the second time that we've tried to do this e-convention. It's a huge achievement from what I see of Cadet McGinn's leadership and K Company. I'm very proud to be here today and get to hear from the many speakers in addition to the cadets. So thank you. So before we get into the speakers, we're actually going to do our national awards. So for the first one, we're going to talk to the Company of the Year. So the Company of the Year is awarded to the #1 senior company. This company has made the biggest impacts in terms of community service, fundraising, academics, and success for the academic year. What we wanted to know is what makes your company stand out from the rest. And this year's recipient is Cornell University C Company 1st Regiment. Congratulations. Our next award is the S&B Volunteer of the Year. This member truly is a background hero for their company. They have the great attendance records at all events, lead by example, and helps out wherever is needed. This award is for the humble servant leader who works hard so that many others may prosper. They aren't always recognized for these efforts, but they deserve every bit of recognition. This year's recipient is Cadet Miguel Hernandez, Jr., K Company, 21st Regiment, Cameron University. Congratulations. Now onto our last awards is the Distinguished Achievement Award. This award is meant to recognize one member from each company that has performed above expectations in regard of military training, academics, and the community. The member is selected by their company advisor. This year's recipients are Scott Snydenberg, C Company, 1st Regiment, Cornell University, New York. Madison Anderson, M Company, 5th Regiment, University of Utah. Marissa McGowan, H Company, 1st Regiment, Pennsylvania State University. Justin Yeck, D Company, 11th Regiment, Texas Tech University. Laura Espinoza, K Company, 21st Regiment, Cameron University. Tyler Howlig, K Company, 59th Regiment, Middle Tennessee State. Jenna Bruno, H Company, 14th Regiment, Clarkson University. Congratulations. This concludes our awards for the 2015-2016 school year. Thank you all for applying.
This time, I have the distinct pleasure of presenting our first speaker for today's event, Captain Shane Smith. Captain Smith is currently the Assistant Level 3 Military Professor here at Middle Tennessee State. MTSU Army cadets have been very fortunate to have him as an instructor and a Scabbard and Blade advisor. He is known here for his determination and strong motivation, supporting the development of Kilo Company, forming the Raider ROTC runners team, and molding well-rounded cadets. Let's give a warm Scabbard and Blade welcome to Captain Shane Smith.
Good afternoon, Scabbard and Blade.
Good afternoon, sir.
I'm very excited to be here at the National E-Convention, and I'm honored to have the opportunity to speak not only to you, but to companies around the nation. General Huber, sir, I thank you for your attendance to this event, and it's a great honor to have you here, and we welcome your leadership experience. Lieutenants Hirsch and Lieutenants Frechette, thank you for making the journey. I'm sure that Cadet McGinn could have pulled it off without you, but it probably wouldn't have been as nice. So thanks for coming, and it's been a great pleasure to meet you guys, finally. So they asked me to come and speak to all Scabbard and Blade units. And I'll admit I'm very intimidated by that. not the best public speaker. But he told me I could be kind of raw and unrehearsed. And I said, that's kind of where I'm at. So I think this might go well. I hope that I can provide some information to help you out. So the main topics that I were given was tell future lieutenants what to expect on their first day at work, how to prepare for those relationships. Kind of made me laugh inside, because what he failed to realize is, 23 years later, I'm still a company grade officer, and my first day was quite some time ago, and it was a private. But I think the experience holds true, and I think that the lessons learned are very valuable. And before I kind of go into how you can be successful, I want to tell you or explain to you how I've got from where from where I started to where I am now, and the impact that time and events have had on my leadership style. So when I joined the Army, 1993, 11 Bravo, actually 11 X-ray, didn't know what that was. I knew it was in the infantry. Went to basic training. They said you're going to be mechanized infantry. Still really didn't know too much about that, but I was excited. I was going to Germany. And I went there and I did what privates do and lower enlisted soldiers do, and I didn't learn much in leadership. In fact, I was a young soldier who was going to get out of the Army. So I planned my PCS to Fort Hood, Texas, and I was just going to ride it out. But events happened. I had a bad day. I had one of those relationships that just didn't work out. And Specialist Smith decided that the Army was his life. And at that time, my attitude changed, my leadership changed, and though it helped me get to where I am, I'm not 100% sure it was a change for the better, because Specialist Smith became a very driven individual who would sacrifice pretty much anything to be successful in the Army. In fact, at some points, I'd made the claim that I was going to be Sergeant Major of the Army, and nothing was going to stand in my way. I was the stereotypical angry non-commissioned officer. Not a proud part of my life, but at the time it served me well. I didn't realize the long-term effect that it was having on my subordinates, though. But again, I pushed forward. I PCS'd to Fort Benning, and I found out when I was assigned to the 4th Ranger Training Battalion that Staff Sergeant Smith wasn't as good as he thought he was. When I signed into the Ranger School, I was one of 27 promotable staff sergeants in one platoon. I no longer stood out. I was no longer the fastest guy. I was no longer the smartest guy. And I definitely wasn't the most tactically sound guy and compared to those other non-commissioned officers that now stood around me. And what happened at that point is I got a great big piece of humble pie shoved right in my face. And I realized something had to change, because I was not the best. I thought I was coming in, but in a few short weeks, it was proven to me that I was not the best. So now, how am I going to effectively train and lead soldiers? And I had to do a complete evaluation. So in reality, I'm very thankful for that humble pie, because it's made me what I am today, which I feel is a more engaged leader that's capable of developing young soldiers, young officers, and leaders. So as you move forward, and as my talking points I hope will highlight, wisdom is something that only comes in time. But as you watch the leaders that you respect, as you watch the leaders that impress you, you will understand that they're not the angry person, typically. They are not the person who's just yelling and screaming at everybody. They're the person who's taken time to actually know about their soldiers. And that's the leaders that I remember. I can remember to this time First Lieutenant Chip Womack, Sergeant First Class Alan Jansen, my very first platoon leader and platoon sergeant. I got a gap of about 5 years after that where I don't know who my leadership was. And that's because they did not leave an impression on me, negative or positive. They were just filling the slot. But I remember those first two, not because of the first two, because they were the best platoon level leadership I've ever had. But they treated people with dignity and respect. And it was years later when that lesson come back to me. Because when I was with them, I was that private who was getting out of the Army. And then I transformed into the angry person. And then I realized it's dignity and respect that is going to win the day every time with your soldiers. So, to the point, arrival at your first duty station. I think we need to look farther back than just when you get to your platoon, when you get to your first battalion, and understand that your basic officer leaders course is not college. It is not a time for college students to go and hang out with college students around the world and have a good time. There's time for fun at your basic course, but you're there to learn a very serious job. You're there to learn your profession. And you've really got to focus on learning your profession and becoming the best officer that you can be. Some of you will get the honor of going to the infantry BOLIC, and they're going to make sure you spend about half time in the field so you don't have to worry about that. But it's not the time to go and act like, you know, a partying college student and be there. You can have fun, but take what you're learning serious, because that is what's going to get you through being a platoon leader. Additionally, that group of individuals that you're in that course with, those are your peers for the rest of your life. Well, the rest of your career at least. Those are your peers. Every time you go to a major school, there's a very high possibility that people out of your BOLIC class are going to be sitting right beside you. Every time you go to a new duty station, one of your peers is going to be somebody out of your BOLIC class. You're going to build relationships there. You should try very hard to build relationships, but professional, lasting relationships, they're going to help you not only in that experience, but in the future. It's very important. So when you show up to your unit, you studied hard at BOLIC, you learned everything you had to know. But you're not going to be the best. Just like I was not the best. You're going to have a weakness. At your first assignment, you're going to have a weakness. Somebody is going to be better than you. And that's okay. That's okay. Don't obsess over trying to be the best. Focus on trying to be the best leader that you can be. And focus on your soldiers. And in the end, you will probably be the best. Because your priorities are focused. Your priorities are in the right place. There's 2 assets in your inventory when you get there as a platoon leader. They're always going to be there and are irreplaceable. And that's soldiers, the obvious one, and families. You have to know your soldiers. You have to know your soldiers' family. So how do you know your soldiers? You have to talk to them. You have to talk to them and treat them like people, like individuals. You should know as much as you can about your soldiers. Now, if you have 40 soldiers, as you will as an infantry platoon leader or wherever you go, it's hard to know everything, but you got to know the important things. And you especially have to know if that soldier has some type of difficulty or struggle in his life that could trigger a separate event, or that could have a negative impact on his performance or her performance. Know your soldiers. Everybody's heard happy wife, happy life, right? It holds true more than more than you could ever imagine in the Army. If your family, if your spouse, if your children are not happy, or if your soldier's family and children are not happy, that soldier is not going to give you everything they've got. That soldier has to know you're doing everything you can to support his ability or her ability to spend quality time with their family. So, something for you to think about as you move forward is ask yourself the question, is motor pool maintenance on Monday so important that your soldier can't attend a doctor's appointment, or that your soldier can't attend a school event, a graduation for that child? Because the leaders who are flexible enough to work their schedule around those events will be more successful with their soldiers' families. A leader who works hard with the family readiness groups, who supports family readiness groups, will have the support of the families. And there's nothing more distracting when you take your soldiers to combat or even do a major training exercise than having to deal not only with soldier issues as a result of families, but with, in some cases, families themselves, because they do not feel like they were properly prepared, or they were not properly prepared for that departure. So always in your planning process, consider families. Subordinates. Subordinate leaders will always try to emulate somebody they respect. They're always going to try to emulate someone they respect. So again, you don't have to be the best, but you have to earn their trust, you have to earn their confidence, and you have to show them what right looks like. It's not difficult. It's simply being there, doing your best all the time, never quitting. It is not going to hurt you to go down to that motor pool, walk up to a private, and PMCS a vehicle with them. In fact, it's going to educate you. And you're going to know more about the soldier, you're going to know more about that piece of equipment, and you're going to be better prepared to lead soldiers. So make a point to do the hard things and show your soldiers that you're willing to get in there and do it. Is there times that you're not going to be able to? Most definitely. Most definitely, especially when you become a company commander and, somebody decided it's a great idea to have the training meeting right after you're supposed to be doing some task, and you got slides to do because the slide deck changed. You're not always going to be able to be at every single thing, but make a point to be at the things that are important, and make a point to participate in everything that you can, because you will earn your soldiers' trust, you will earn your soldiers' respect, confidence, and they're going to emulate you. They're going to do what they see you doing because they respect you. All right, so perhaps the most controversial thing I'm going to talk about today: relationships between the commander and lieutenants. As most of you know, I am very big on the first name. In my opinion, from my leadership style, I almost always call my lieutenants by their first name. And the reason I did that is because of the relationship we have. In my infantry company, I had 143 soldiers, counting officers, but there was only 5 of us. And the level of responsibility that second lieutenants hold within that company is tremendous. The most inexperienced soldier in that company has a significant amount of responsibility. So when I address them, I want them to feel comfortable talking to me, bringing me issues, presenting me problems, and just overall general communication. But there was also an unspoken code that when lieutenant came out and you all of a sudden, platoon leader, became lieutenant, then the conversation had changed. And it was time for mentorship. It was time for perhaps discipline, or maybe just a little retraining. But for me, rather than becoming an angry individual, I could change the way I addressed you, and all of a sudden, I had their full attention. But you got to be careful, because it is not okay for subordinate leaders, i.e. squad leaders, platoon sergeants, privates, to adjust to that style, because their span of control, in my opinion, is significant. Well, their span of control is significantly lower, so they have a more controlled relationship. So just be careful when you use it. Use it intentionally. Don't use it more as a social event. But communication is the number one thing between officers, well, lieutenants and commanders. And if we don't have good, solid, trustworthy communications, we're not going to accomplish anything. Okay, last but not least, 48 months as a lieutenant. When I commissioned in 2006, 36 months I was a captain. You're going to spend 48 months as a lieutenant. There's no rush. You're going to deploy. No reason to rush it. And you're going to have plenty of time to be a platoon leader. You're going to have plenty of time to be a staff lieutenant. And if you push yourself hard, you're going to have plenty of time to get a specialty platoon. But you've got to take care of yourself right up front. 48 months is a long time, so I encourage you to take advantage of all training events, all training opportunities that are available to you. Get an opportunity to go to Ranger School, you go to Ranger School. You get an opportunity to go to any school that has leader in it, you go to it. Because you have plenty of time. There's no rush. Take advantage of the opportunities you have, because once you go to that platoon, it's over. You are not getting an opportunity to go to another career-enhancing school until you graduate the captain's career course. And then, based on op tempo, you may get a chance. So take advantage of your time right up front. Get as much training as you can. Get as much development as you can, so that when you step into that platoon the first time, you are the most trained, most prepared lieutenant that you can be. And that's Captain Smith's words of wisdom on what to do on your first day. It's not great, but I've learned from my mistakes. I wish I could have learned much faster. Interesting that just recently, and I've shared this with one of my cadets, just recently I got the good old Facebook message from a soldier I had, I would say, 14 years ago. I was a young squad leader, brand new private, and I hadn't had no communication with that soldier for a long period of time. And sent me a Facebook message, reinforced that I probably wasn't the nicest guy he ever met, but I pushed him, held him to the standard, but participated with him. And because of that, he's a better person. He's not in the Army anymore, but we carry that with us. So those are the rewards that we get as leaders to kind of reinforce what we've done. So at this time, I want to transition my discussion some to the scabbard and blade itself. And more importantly, I get asked, sir, why scabbard and blade? Why do I want to be in the scabbard and blade? So what I wanted to present to you is how do we make scabbard and blade relevant? I have an idea of why it's important and how it's relevant, But how do we make other people understand why Scabbard and Blade is so relevant? And the first thing that I think is important is that the Scabbard and Blade is an honor society. So by being here or being at any of the other universities, you've already demonstrated that you are pushing yourself, you are doing better or working harder than your peers. And we need to recognize that, because we can take you, the cadet who's willing to push themselves, and we can always find better ways or more productive ways to develop your leadership. And that obviously is the number one goal, is to develop leaders. Secondly, no operation that you do today in the military is done by one branch alone. Every time you deploy, every time you go to a training event, you're going to have Air Force representatives. You're going to have Navy representatives, even in the desert. And obviously you're going to have Army soldiers. So the Scabbard and Blade is unique because it is the only organization that takes exceptional leaders from all branches and puts them together so that they can learn to speak the inter-service language, how to communicate with each other, understand rank structure, understand how we're going to employ each one of these assets in support of our fight. But we got a long way to go. So I broke it down a few ways, but the first thing I want to talk about or address is company advisors. When Scabbard and Blade come to MTSU, cadets brought it to me. They said, "Sir, we want to do this. Will you be the guy who signs the paper and serves as a company advisor?" I thought, well, that sounds easy enough. I can sign a piece of paper. But that's not good enough. Advisors have to be active. Advisors have to make sure the cadets understand that what we're doing is important. And if the cadets don't get support from us, then the organization is not going to succeed. So we have to be active. And the best way that we can be active is to serve as mentors. We need active duty mentors for our cadets. But it's very difficult to address. But if we work forward, or we push forward and work to do it, we can make it happen. All the advisors know people of different branches and different services. All we have to do is pull 2 or 3 of those individuals, submit them to the national organization, and all of a sudden we have a database represents all branches, all services of active people who can advise cadets. Somebody, not their instructor, who can go out there and answer questions, real-time questions about what should I expect, what should I do, what should I prepare? Hey, how's housing in Hawaii? You know, those are real questions that cadets are going to have, that lieutenants have, that we need answers for. So up front, right from the start, advisors have to take an active role. But there's other ways. We can get it started, but the cadets need to work forward. So all the cadets that are now juniors and seniors have had 2 graduating classes at least go before them. There's a whole pool of cadets right from your own, lieutenants, right from your own university that graduated right before you, who are now serving either in BOLIC or as platoon leaders somewhere in the Army, all different branches. So let's reach out to those lieutenants who have already got that experience, who already have some of the answers, definitely not all of them, but they have some of the answers, and they can help us build this database. But the most important factor is you. Cadets ask all the time, how can I find out what's going on? Who can I ask these questions to? For me, it's difficult to answer questions when the female cadets say, hey, sir, what's my life going to be like? Well, I can tell you what from my perspective as a 23-year infantryman, but that's probably much different than somebody who's actually been in the branch that you're going to be working in. So we need those assets, we need those resources. But what are you going to do when you graduate? Are you going to graduate and walk away from the Scabbard and Blade? Or are you going to graduate, go to BOLIC, go be a platoon leader, and make that phone call or send that email to the national office and say, hey, I want to be that person. I want to be that mentor or advisor. Here's where I'm stationed. This is my branch. And now we have a group of Scabbard and Blade officers, alumni, who are capable of mentoring young cadets. So really, it's on you. We need to get it started. We need to build the base. But it's on all of you to carry that forward and actually make it successful. And the last thing really to make it relevant is, how do we make cadets, how at our school even, how do we make cadets want to be in Scabbard and Blade? There's lots of things going on campus. Plenty of intramurals. ROTC takes a lot of time, probably working a job. Maybe I'm, fraternity, sorority. There's a lot going on. But how do I get people to be in the Scabbard and Blade? And really, it boils down to one thing. You got to make them want to be there. You got to make them want to be you. So what are you doing to make that happen? Some things that we have done here at MTSU, which have proved successful, is leader development exercises. Just recently, our company went out to the Chickamauga battlefield and did a 100% cadet planned, rehearsed, and executed staff ride of the Chickamauga battlefield. My only responsibility was signing a risk assessment and driving the van. And I tell you, it was one of the better experiences of my military career. I really enjoyed myself because I didn't have to do any of the work. I probably answered a question here or there, but the cadets learned how to plan and execute that operation. Then they've got to focus on leader lessons and tactical doctrine while we were there. Great experience, really enjoyed it. One of the number one things in the Army that's going to make or break you, PT. So, how does the Scabbard and Blade impact that? For us, we have additional PT, Scabbard and Blade. They run it every day after PT. It's fun time. But in addition to that, we also have a running club, if you will, more like a group of soldiers who get together and exercise. But we go out, myself included, and we participate in races and events in the community with our ROTC gear or Scabbard and Blade gear on, and we represent our organization in these events. And the cadets do very well. Not me so much, but the cadets do very well at these events. But that's a way that they're out there, they're building teams, they're promoting themselves within the community, building relationships in the community. So we do those things. Working with other units on campus or other groups, extremely important. MTSU is blessed to have a veterans organization, Bravo, and the Scabbard and Blade partners with them on a regular basis to participate in campus events and off-campus events. Habitat for Humanity, cookouts for veterans. There's many ways we can do this. So I encourage you, find a way. Not everybody is blessed with hundreds of Civil War battlefields to go study. You know, we're fortunate based on our location. But there's something out there, there's something in your community that you can do, that you can build on, that the Scabbard and Blade can make better. So find those events, get active in your community, and focus on leader development. The Scabbard and Blade will excel as long as you take an interest now, but you continue to support and build and develop leaders as alumni of the Scabbard and Blade, and build that strong mentorship program that we're trying to establish. Thank you, and at this time, Cadet McGinn.
Wow, let's get another round of applause for Captain Smith. That was awesome. Thank you, sir, again for your words of wisdom and your guidance.
My name is Jonathan Knight, and this evening I'll be talking to you about honor. The dictionary definition of honor is respect given to someone that is admired, good quality, or character is valued by other people. This is our first star, and I think it's the most important, and I think it was put there because they created it based on the original 5 stars. These 5 stars are loyalty, efficiency, courage, obedience, and good fellowship. While they're all very important, I would go further to subcategorize them into 2. Be the true core of honor, and then the second one would be the traits of excellence. These go hand in hand, and they definitely work with each other, but I think it would be, to truly understand what honor is, would be to break them down into those 2 groups. The first one I'm going to talk about of the first group is loyalty. On the Scabbard and Blade website, it describes loyalty as the fundamental characteristic of the true soldier. And soldier doesn't necessarily mean army. It's any airman, any sailor, any marine, or any soldier. It's anyone in the military force that is really of outstanding character. That's what the soldier, I believe what the soldier is in that definition. It's the foundation of our society as a whole, not just Scabbard and Blade, our organization, but the government of our country, the society that we have in that. It is, without loyalty, we have nothing, to be honest, because we're loyal to our government, we pay taxes, we're loyal to our people, we help people out, there are charities everywhere. We're loyal to the Americans because that's who we are. And it's our responsibility to not only be loyal to our citizens, but to be loyal to our flag as people in the military, to be loyal to our country, the citizens we protect, and the unifying organization that we have of Scabbard and Blade. We have to be loyal to all of these people and things, because without it, there's truly no honor to be had in this organization, and that's what would set us apart from everyone else. The second pillar I'm going to talk about is courage. The courage we need is quiet and unassuming. We don't brag about the courage we have, because often when you find people brag about how courageous they are and how brave they are, they're usually the first to shy away in the sign of adversity. So while it's not bad to talk about courage, and if you've proven your courage, it can be referenced, but we don't need to brag about it to other people. Courage is to be unwavering. Now, to me personally, I am terrified of spiders. They are the spawn of Satan, and they're tiny and they're mischievous, and they're just terrible. But whenever I'm hanging out with my little cousins, and they, Uncle John, or Cousin John, and I have to go kill a spider, by God, that spider's not going to make it out of there. Because we have to be courageous for those that we protect. And obviously, we're not in the military to kill spiders, we're in the military to defend from bad guys. And it's a much taller order, and that is the courage that we need to have is of a higher order. We must have courage to be good stewards of the nation, because without courage, we can't be leaders. And I think that goes without saying, because it's the leaders that have the courage to tell their people, we have to go into battle. Yeah, we might not make it back, but this is our job and we have to do it. Can I count on you? And that is the kind of courage that we need in the military. The third pillar of the first group is obedience. Our obedience needs to be prompted and questioning. We have a responsibility to our superiors that they say, go do something, and they have to trust that we're going to go do it, and we have to trust them that they're not sending us to do something that is contradictory to A, our beliefs, B, the beliefs of the country, and C, the moral standard of why we're fighting. Obedience is imperative for good order and discipline. And that goes right hand in hand with the first point I made. Good order and discipline is what we need to function well as a military unit. It's what gives us the precision and the professionalism to carry out orders without a hitch. Obedience is often confused with being a yes person. Yes man, yes woman. We don't just say yes because we're just following orders. General Robin Rand, I had the pleasure of listening to him speak yesterday, in fact, and he said that we don't just say yes because it's a reaction. We say yes because we have the ability to think 3 times faster than the normal American, than the normal citizen, than the normal person. So while they think, oh, it's just a reaction for them to say yes, we've already processed what could happen, and we're saying, yeah, I'm going to go in there. I'm going to do that. The person that I think of that really personifies these 3 traits, obedience, courage, and loyalty, is retired Colonel Schwarzenegger, who was a prisoner of war in the Vietnam conflict. He was an F-4 pilot with 3,500 career flight hours, and he was forced down in northern Vietnam on the 16th day of February in 1972. His mission was to ensure that surface-to-air missile sites were empty so that the bombers could go in and wipe them out. And he was told that there were 3 of them, but there was a 4th one that was top secret that never made his briefing. So naturally, he never heard about it and wasn't prepared for it. After being forced down, he was taken to a prisoner of war camp and confined to solitary confinement for 407 days. For those of you like me who aren't a math whiz, I had to pull out a calculator and everything. That's 13 and a half months of being by yourself and being tortured every single day. Solitary confinement didn't work so well for our enemies as they had hoped. They had developed a tapping communication that they had them room next to each other. While they couldn't be next to them and they couldn't be around them, they could still communicate by tapping. And everyone shared this code. And he said that communication was our lifeline. It was how we survived. I know those people better than I know my own wife, even though I never met those people in prison with me. After 13 and a half grueling months, he was released on the 23rd day of March in 1973, and we have the privilege at Detachment 670 at Oklahoma State University to be visited by him at least once a year. And he always finishes with this quote: "Never forget. Remember those who gave the ultimate sacrifice, and remember those who have yet to come home and may never return home." The second group I have, called the traits of excellence. They are the 2 remaining, the efficiency and good fellowship. Efficiency is incredibly important because anybody can do something, but it takes a special person, a high caliber person, to do something quickly and efficiently and effectively. It requires both focus and skill that you can't find in the average person today. And efficient people are always looking to improve. Efficiency is not something you reach. Efficiency is something you reach for. You can never really obtain efficiency because we're always making advancements in technology, procedures, things. We're streamlining things. Efficiency is something that is always sought after and is always obtained in small increments. It can never be truly obtained. The idea can't be achieved in and of itself. And the last pillar I'm going to talk about is good fellowship. Anybody in the military has been a part of any military operation knows the importance of morale. It has the effect on how people work. It has the effect on the productivity, quality, and it is so important in every aspect, military or civilian. It creates a positive work environment, which will always be beneficial to anybody who has to work in a team or in a unit. And without morale or without good fellowship that we create, it's very, very difficult to get the desired results that we need, especially with the sequestration that we've been attempting to work with for the past few years. And we have to remember good fellowship because we got to remember who the enemies are. If we're secluding ourselves from our unit, from our group, then we're dividing ourselves. And when we divide ourselves, it makes us weak. There's a possibility to make our comrades our enemies. And if we can't keep ourselves together and unified from the inside, it's going to be very easy for the enemy to take over us. Today I talked to you about honor and its 5 pillars, the 2 groups that you can subdivide these pillars into to truly understand honor a little better, and those are the true core of honor and the traits of excellence. And without all 5 of these pillars, I don't think you can truly understand what honor means. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Cadet Sarah Crum. I am an Army ROTC cadet here at MTSU in my junior year. Tonight, I will be speaking to you on one of the most important stars of Scabbard and Blade, leadership. Leadership is defined in Webster Dictionary by having the capacity to lead, but leadership is so much more than that. To me, the best leaders are defined by effectively rising above the standards and inspiring individuals to rise above with them as well. A good leader finds out what drives and motivates others. This understanding leads to the success and increasing of productivity within a society. As a cadet with the ROTC program, we are expected to show professionalism, be trustworthy, have respect, and have integrity. These are all great qualities that a true leader possesses. The Scabbard and Blade Honor Society has provided me with the additional opportunities to implement these values and elevate my own personal leadership skills. My comrades and I have worked together on developing a camaraderie within our society that breeds excellence and leadership, and I think we have established just that. With the help of prior Scabbard and Blade guidance, we have created a positive environment to bolster true leadership qualities. There are many different types of leadership styles and approaches that can be used. I have observed throughout my time with the ROTC program that in the military, you must have servant leadership. Being a leader for the armed forces means that you serve others and not just the officers appointed over you. You serve your country, the citizens in your community, your peers, and all of your soldiers. Scabbard and Blade has encouraged this thought by teaching us that being a leader is not always a popularity contest. Sometimes the best leaders are not popular at all, but they can be very effective. As we continue our journey to become future officers, we strive every day to become better than the people that we were yesterday. Some of the best leaders have what the Army likes to call emotional intelligence. These leaders work hard every day not to just condition their bodies, but to also condition the mind and the soul. Growth and development are essential to rising above the standard and accomplishing missions successfully. That being said, commissioning only gives a person a title. Leadership is not set by the position that someone is placed in, but the example that they set. It is not power that makes someone a true leader, but the impact of touching others' lives. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. My name is Cadet Major Lawless, accompanied by Cadet First Sergeant Saucer and Cadet First Lieutenant Ariano. We are cadets of Marion Military Institute, and we are part of the 5th District AF Company of the 21st Regiment of Scabbard and Blade. We're here to talk to you about the 3rd star of Scabbard and Blade, professionalism. Professionalism is the competence or skill expected of the professional. It means the strict adherence to courtesy, honesty, and responsibility when dealing with individuals or groups of people. One example of professionalism in the civilian world is the specialized knowledge used by professors, scientists, and other specialists in particular fields that require that knowledge to tackle many issues they may face.
Another example of professionalism in the civilian world is with a CEO or manager. And the way that a CEO or manager display professionalism is not only in their knowledge of work, but in the way they interact with others. Um, Particularly being a CEO or a manager, you're going to be working with a diverse group of people. So the way you carry yourselves in front of them and with them helps you bring out many leadership aspects and develops your professionalism within that.
I think probably the best example of professionalism in today would be in the military, where not only do you need to be credible and knowledgeable in your MOS or specific job, but you really need to have a professional attitude. I think your attitude plays a large part in professionalism because it helps people get a feel for the kind of person that you are. So if you can maintain a professional attitude, then you can make sure that everyone respects you and everyone will look up to you, and it sets a standard for how you need to act. And professionalism in the military is quite obvious because with a ranking system, it's obvious to pick a decisive leader that's based on professionalism. You need to know that the person that you're working under or over or with has that level of professionalism to where you can work with them regardless of where they come from and regardless of their backgrounds. If you think of it like a machine, a group of people or a unit that has a similar goal as a machine, then you can think of the individual people as cogs, and professionalism is the grease that help all the cogs work together and get along and accomplish their goal. My personal experience with professionalism as a cadet first sergeant of a band company would be to always lead by example, because if I'm not professional and I don't maintain that standard of attitude, the people who are also my peers here at Marion Military Institute would have a lot harder time trying to follow my directives or objectives and trying to accomplish our goal. Whether it's performing or marching or whether it's core activities, you have to maintain that level of professionalism regardless of who your subordinates or friends are, because you can't make that kind of distinction with professionalism. You have to make sure that you keep your professional attitude even in a personal environment.
My experience with professionalism as the cadet XO for band company has been not with interacting with people, but in my display of work. I am in charge of sending up reports for my company and also keeping the records of our counselings and evaluations of the company. And with that, professionalism plays a big role because in the way I display my statuses and my reports and just the findings I find in my records has to be in a professional manner, and it's not intended to be anything sloppy.
Professionalism to me means to keep a level head as the Honor Council chairman at this institute. It means I must have the knowledge to make all decisions for accused cadets based off of fact and to remain unbiased for the sake of all parties.
I think also when professionalism, in regards to Scabbard and Blade, which Scabbard and Blade is a national military honor society, professionalism plays a large part in Scabbard and Blade because we have so many people from across the nation. So as I've said before, professionalism kind of sets a standard of attitude when you're working with someone. So I would feel comfortable working with someone from California, New York, or meeting other members of Scabbard and Blade or former members of Scabbard and Blade, because I know that being pulled from the top 20% of whichever particular core organization that they were pulled from, they have that necessary level of professionalism that I would be able to work with anyone, regardless of their background, location, or depending on whether they rank or no rank. And it really just depends on whether they have that attitude of wanting to work and accomplish that similar goal. In conclusion, I think professionalism is a necessity in today's world. You cannot be a leader without being a professional, not necessarily in a specific field, but a professional, in being a professional leader. You have to have that attitude, you have to carry yourself appropriately.
Officership is having a place of authority, or like just being an officer in any one of our service organizations, police, fire department, and it's not so much authority, but being part of a group and having mutual respect with each other, as well as not dominating, but also working with each other. Scabbard and Blade will help with officership because we get to work with not only more Air Force cadets, but also Army cadets, and learn how they would teach leadership.
Officership to me is something that we get to do being in the Army or as in the Air Force because we work with Scabbard and Blade, but it definitely gives me more responsibility and it allows me to use different organizational skills and things of that nature to help those below me, around me, all of that allow me to really use my skills. The whole point is that I'm going to be able to direct someone, direct people, be able to be directed by those above me, and have mutual respect for those above and below. Really, through Scabbard and Blade, I can use those around me, the kids younger and then those older, to gain insight into their experiences, see what they've gone through, and since we really don't experience anything with the Air Force ROTC, we get to see what they go through, hear from them, see what they've experienced, see what people in our battalion being an Army experience, because no one really has the same experience, because we all have different interests, different things we want to do in the future, and yeah.
Service. Service is much more than just serving our government. It's serving our community as well. And our community is here in Madison, Wisconsin. Last year we took part in some service activities, including visiting the VA hospital, which gave us the opportunity to see the military from a different perspective and take in some of their advice and guidance. They were genuinely interested in who we were as people and appreciated someone listening to their stories. I don't think they quite realized how much impact they had on not only myself, but everyone that went. So in order to help them out, we always support an event called the Heroes 5K, which is a 5K where the proceeds go directly to the Veterans Hospital, and also Badge Your Honor Flight, which is an organization that supports getting World War II veterans to see their memorial in Washington, D.C.
Mentorship is a part of officership. And as an officer, you're not only like a leader for your subordinates, but you're also going to be a mentor to them. An example of that is at our DET, job positions rotate every semester. And last semester, I had 2 cadets underneath me as Inspector General. And as Inspector General, our job is kind of more behind the scenes. And both of my cadets did a wonderful job, performing their duties, observing things, and documenting to make sure that all of our objectives were met. But that being said, they needed to expand their different leadership qualities. And I thought to do that was to recommend them to be training officers next semester. And that's worked out very, very well for them. They both got those positions, and now they've really grown as a leader.
Oh, hey. Scabbard and Blade Honor Society was founded by our 5 founders, Leo Cook, Albert Foster, Victor Griggs, Charles Taylor, and Harold Weld, during the 1904-1905 school year at our own university here in Wisconsin. In our company meetings, we seek to honor not only our branch's military history and traditions, but also that of the society. We do so by learning about and following the different customs and courtesies that exist between the Army, Air Force, Navy, and Marine Corps. As a company, we're always looking for ways to learn more about the history of our country and military as a whole. We have visited the Veterans Museum downtown as a company, and for the past few semesters, we've been reading books about the military and current issues around the world. One of our favorite company traditions is our initiation ceremony that takes place every January. It's a great opportunity for the company to come together as a whole and for new members to mingle with the old members. We as cadets really gain from the experiences our company advisor shares with us, and for the past few initiations, we've had our company advisor's father come, who's a graduate of the University of Wisconsin and also a veteran. As the founding company of Scabbard and Blade, it's our duty to preserve the Scabbard and Blade flagpole that has been proudly flying since 1931 in the middle of our campus. We have refurbished and rededicated that flagpole 2 times.
2 times.
Hi, I'm Midshipman 2nd Class Welsh and Finance Officer in 1A Mother Company, here to talk about military standards. One of the largest things as midshipmen or cadets is learning these military standards, because as an officer, one day we're going to be held to the highest standard and leading by example for our future sailors, Marines, airmen, and soldiers. In Scabbard and Blade, we're upheld to even higher standard for GPA and physical fitness. For example, everyone needs a minimum GPA to get into the program, and also we took a CFT, combat fitness test, that the Marine Corps uses to determine combat readiness. We all took it, and as long as you met the standards, you were allowed to be in the program. But it goes beyond just that. It's following the UCMJ, and we have a zero tolerance policy for drugs and alcohol, and making sure that every service member follows those rules, as well as many other rules that as service members we're held to. And that's what separates the United States military perhaps from other militaries, is our high regard to following these rules. Again, as Scabbard and Blade members, we try to understand these requirements and uphold ourselves to the highest standard of following them, so we can be the best officers we can in each and every branch.
The 5th star for Scabbard and Blade, which is unity, and also to relate it to the other stars. And I hadn't thought about unity, that star, very much, but this has caused me to do that. We all know that Scabbard and Blade was founded in 1904 at the University of Wisconsin in Madison. If you look at that was 112 years ago. It's interesting to go back and look at what they thought was important and study. They said the primary purpose of Scabbard and Blade, 112 years ago they said this, is to raise the standards of military education in American colleges and universities. But they quickly added to unify in closer relationships their military departments. So unity from the very beginning has been, I think appropriately, an important part for Scabbard and Blade. When we look at the 5 stars, the question comes to mind, well, why did they even have the 5 stars? Why do we have them? And I think unity is a central aspect of why we have the 5 stars. It's when they picked them, or when we picked the 5 stars we are using now, you notice that every service, the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, has a set of principles they follow and teach by. And we could have adopted any one of those, but it would have been contrary to our ideal of creating unity to do that. It's interesting to look at the 5 stars as I go through them. The first one, honor, was really made up of the 5 stars originally set by the founders. And they said the sum of these was honor. Now, when I was a cadet, we had to memorize these. And we had to be able to relate them and explain them to our seniors as we were being inducted as pledges. They were also secret. So it was special. Unlike today where we're not hiding what we're doing, they were secret. And I'd like to point out that I think that gave us a great sense of unity in Scabbard and Blade, because we had this special thing in common. Interestingly, I had a retired Colonel Wayne Johnson, an old friend of mine from college, called just this week. Hadn't talked to him in years. And I said, by the way, we were in Scabbard Blade together. I said, do you remember what the 5 stars are? And I couldn't believe it. He remembered what they were. So it tells you the impact that doing this kind of thing can have, and the unity you can feel together by having these things in common. If we look at all of the stars today, and I think they've been, no, I didn't do it, but they've been brilliantly added to help our way that we can use them as guidelines to train by in Scabbard and Blade. If you look at leadership, every service, all of us, no matter what service, no matter what our job in the military, leadership is key to us as officers. The 3rd star, professionalism. The U.S. military, whether you realize it or not, is really one of the few militaries in the world to be considered truly professional. And it certainly leads all the rest as a profession. Jointness, or unity, is a key part of being a professional in our military. Officership, the 4th star, is another example of a unifying principle we all share in Scabbard Blade. That brings us to the 5th star that I'm to talk about, which is unity. And the term under unity, the principles all refer to joint, and we're familiar with what jointness is. Jointness in our military has not always been as good as it is today. I remember back in the 70s and 80s a lot of operations failing because of a failure in our ability to work jointly together. So that brings the question up, why is unity important? And it brings to mind to me an old saying that goes something like this. It's that soldiers, and I use the term soldiers generically here, it means sailors or airmen or Marines or whatever. Soldiers do not fight for patriotism and glory. When the bottom line comes to us, they fight because of their comrades, because of their unit cohesion. It's key to build this unity for a unit not to fail, but to succeed. After 37 years of serving in the military, I have found that unity in varying degrees in units. And it didn't matter whether it was a joint organization or not. Unity can be an elusive thing. So that brings up the question, more look inside into unity. Last summer, I attended for the first time ever a reunion of my old rifle company from Vietnam. And what struck me about that was how good it made me feel to see these old men. I was the only young one there. It had been 45 years, you understand. But how good I felt to be back with that group again. And it gives me a better understanding of unity because we were young together, we faced hardships together, we faced danger together, and difficult times. And it brought that saying back to me, what unity means and how it's built in a unit. Another question comes to mind, can we as officers, can we as leaders build unity or create it or contribute to unity in a unit? Definitely we can, because one thing that struck me at this reunion was how positively all the soldiers felt about the man that was our company commander in that company. They thought he was terrific, and I did too, but I didn't see it from their perspective. Another man took over the company, another officer, they disliked this individual greatly. When I later saw some old newspaper articles about our company, I found out the battalion command referred to us as Happy Company. And that was clearly because of this company commander. So I think the fact that they called us Happy Company certainly testifies to this fact that this officer built unity in this rifle company. The final question I would ask us to pose is unity always positive? And I would say yes, it is, but it's like a double-edged sword. It cuts both ways. And I have one final example to make. I grew up around Fort Smith, Arkansas, And I found out not long ago that it's the home of William O. Darby, who is the father or the founder of the modern Army Rangers. Since I had the pleasure of going through Ranger School myself, I went and visited it. And there was a retired Air Force Lieutenant Colonel who took, the kindness of his heart to maintain this home as a museum. And he would hold reunions for these old World War II Army Rangers. And he told me an interesting story. He said, I said, well, how is it to have these guys from World War II, the legendary Army Rangers, come in? He said, well, it gets interesting. He said, one of the things they argue a lot. He said the 1st Battalion of the Army Rangers trained at the British Commando School, and they made the landings in North Africa in World War II. He said they feel like if you didn't land in North Africa with them, you're not a real Ranger. The 2nd Ranger Battalion participated in the Normandy invasion and climbed the cliff at Point du Hoc, if you know your history. And by gosh, if you didn't climb that cliff, you're not a real Ranger. And then finally, the 6th Battalion, to name another one, was in the Philippines. And there's a movie out recently, I think, about how they raided a Japanese POW camp and saved all these prisoners. If you weren't in the Philippines and you didn't raise that camp, you're not a real Ranger. So I think you're beginning to see my point here. Here are these old men. There are just a handful of them left. They were part of the very small elite force, and they're arguing about who's a Ranger, who's a real Ranger. Now, so do you see my point that unity can be a cutting-edge deal? It's very positive in a unit, but it can work against us in the military if we're not careful. Today, our military is relatively small. Only 1% of individuals in this country serve in our military. So we certainly shouldn't be hard to feel a sense of pride and unity together if we're in the nation's military. I think we need to be conscious, and I'm glad that's why that's an important thing we're trying to do in Scabbard and Blake. That in each school, we try to get all the services, the cadets and midshipmen, all together in Scabbard and Blake to contribute to unity. I just conclude to say we strive in Scabbard and Blake to build a sense of unity among military service for our members. We have expanded, in essence, on the 112-year-old concept of the 5 stars to help in education and in remembering the principles embodied in them. The concept of unity, I would tell you, is paramount in all of these 5 stars. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Lieutenant General Keith Huber. Lieutenant General Huber retired September 2013 after 38 years in the U.S. Army. He's not too fond of lengthy introductions for himself, so I'll try to keep it short. Please welcome Lieutenant General Keith Huber.
Thank you, sir. Well, first of all, I'm very appreciative of this opportunity to be involved in what I consider to be a continuing development of leadership. Captain Smith, your previous words about what to expect as a leader, whether it's your first day or not, because I submit to you that every time you do a permanent change of station, at whatever rank, it's your first day all over again. But to me, you epitomize what I always wanted to be, a leader that understood both sides of that coin. A gentleman who started as a private and understood how the good ideas of the officers above you translated to the privates who had to do them, and then the challenges of a non-commissioned officer and now as a commissioned officer. So I felt your comments were very sage and very emotional as you shared with us part of your personal development. So thank you for doing that. I asked that I not be introduced as you attend military events and you find people who are well-intentioned but feel obligated to read everything that the U.S. military has allowed you to do in your life. If you ever get comfortable hearing that, I submit to you, you need to get a grip on your own ego, because it's a privilege to serve our nation as they ask us to. I'll share some things for your consideration, and let me share with you my foxhole perspective. So, my grandfather was a doughboy in World War I. He was there for 4 years. My father was in World War II, flew P-38s in the Pacific. And when I say that to the Air Force people, they get all excited, and I go, you know, you obviously haven't done your history, because it was the Army Air Corps then, before the creation of the Air Force. And while my father was always gracious enough to me not to complain about his simple infantryman, Green Beret son, I know that in his heart he wished that I had been in the Air Force and had the love of being a fighter pilot as he did. So I entered West Point the 1st of July 1971 and was commissioned the 4th of June 1975 as an infantryman. And as you heard, I retired the 1st of September 2013 after the privilege to serve 38 years of my life on active duty. My last 2 years in command in Afghanistan. Of my 38 years, I spent 14 as a general officer. 5 as a 1-star, 5 as a 2-star, and 4 as a 3-star. So that's what shapes my perspective. I was asked to speak about jointness, about joint leadership. And you heard Major General Dollar talk a little bit about jointness. So in 1986, the Armed Forces of the United States had not convinced the U.S. Congress that we could play well together, that we could learn well together, let alone fight well together as the United States Armed Forces. So they passed the Goldwater-Nichols Act of 1986, which decreed that you would not be promoted in the Armed Forces of the United States at the field grade and the general officer level unless you had served in joint duty assignments, unless you showed a proficiency, an acknowledgement, a recognition as to the reality of the world that you never do anything on your own. You never did. You never went anywhere as a single branch within a service or as a service. But it took Congress to go. So I went to the Armed Forces Staff College in 1986 as the first class of what they referred to as a joint staff officer. And so you had to go to a formalized education, and then you had to serve bona fide joint billet tours. And once you completed that puzzle, why then they said, okay, you're a JSO, and so that's what they forced us into jointness. And jointness isn't our problem now. So I have, at the colonel level, but more importantly at the 1-star, the 2-star, and the 3-star level, I have commanded joint task forces in peacetime. In peacekeeping operations, normally chapter 6.5, where you said you were in a peacekeeping operation like Haiti, but people were still trying to kill you, and so you still needed to be able to defend yourself, and in combat. And in fact, my 2 years in command in Afghanistan, I was in charge of a critter called Combined Joint Interagency Task Force 435, and so we'll talk about that. But to me, that complexity is the reality of the world. The reality of the world is that you're going to deal with this group of diverse human beings, and you're going to be assigned the leadership role. I mean, as I was listening during the break, and congratulations on being a captain select, but the culture, the terminology within our services, I mean, you wouldn't be a captain select in the Army. Do you know what you'd be? You'd be a first lieutenant promotable. So, I mean, and it used to drive me nuts in Afghanistan. In my Combined Joint Interagency Task Force, where I just look at the jointness. And I had 3 different secretaries of defense during my 2 years in Afghanistan. And every one that they'd come to see me, I go, Mr. Secretary, can't you get the services to be consistent in the tour length? Because to an organization, let alone an organization in combat, how disruptive it is to constantly have people rotate out at different intervals. I mean, one service would be there 4 months, one service would be there 6 months, one service would be there 8 months, one would be 12, 14 months. And every individual is essential. And so I'd ask the Secretary of Defense, can you just get them to go, honest to goodness, here is the length of a combat tour in Afghanistan? And they go, no. I go, wow, why? And they go, because that is the service's recruitment tool. That with the implication that certain people wouldn't go to certain services, understanding that unfortunately you could rest upon that you would be deployed to combat fairly shortly in your entry to the armed forces. And I say unfortunately because sometimes we learn bad examples of leadership in combat that if you don't understand a broader perspective, you may translate that into stateside behavior when you're not in combat. So the Combined Joint Interagency Task Force is really your joint challenge of the armed forces that you're going to enter. You're always going to be there in a combined fashion. You're always going to have military from other nations. You're always going to have interagency. I mean, the Combined Joint Interagency Task Force that I commanded in Afghanistan, I had people from NSA, DEA, CIA, DIA, FBI, and so I was the commander on the organizational chart. But everybody had their own separate leadership diagram, of which I wasn't on it, just like the services. And so to be a leader in the complex reality of jointness or combined or interagency, I think it forces you into a realistic approach of being a leader. I mean, combat's easy. Because in combat, particularly if you're in an organization where you lose men and women on a frequent basis, I mean, combat clarifies your life in a simplistic fashion. You understand what is important. And what's important is the survivability and the protection of the person to your left and right. What's important is the hope that you return back to your family and your pledge to yourself that if you return back, you will definitely cherish every moment of every day, and you will demonstrate an appreciation for life and the love and support of your family and friends that you may not have recognized before you faced instances of life and death. And it teaches you what courage is. We've heard people talk about courage. The most courageous thing you'll ever see is from a leadership perspective of identifying a mission that you ask people to go on, that your risk assessment of that mission is that some of them will not return. And then to have the moral courage to tell them that, to look them in the eye, and with honor and integrity and candor go, here's what I'm asking you to do, and here's the risk associated with it, and hopefully I can go with you, but based upon your task and your duty position and your seniority, you may not be able to go with them, and to have them humble you by going, got it, sir. We'll go do this. And then when some of them don't return, do you have the moral courage to repeat that? Do you have the courage of leadership to always care for the men and women that you serve and always respect their precious families, but at the same time, give them a task to defend our nation from which they may not return. That's the courage of leadership. And jointness puts a new dimension in that, because each of the services have a culture. Just like combined, each of the nations have a culture. And you as the leader you've got to find a commonality, because people don't follow you based upon the rank you wear. People don't follow you based upon your duty position. People don't follow you if you're the biggest or the baddest or the strongest. They don't follow you based upon your gender or your religion or your color. You can't order people to follow you. The day that you've got to go, hey, I'm in charge, I'm ordering you to do this, is you've lost control of your organization. But worse than that, you've lost the essence of leadership, because people allow you to be their leader. They willingly follow you, at times to their death, based upon a sense of mutual respect and love that you earn every bloody day by demonstrating, however senior you are, that you're willing to put aside your personal comfort and your personal safety, that you're proud to serve, that you share the sacrifice and the hardship, and you lead. So how do you do that when each of the services has a different culture, and each of the services has a different expectation of what their leaders are? It's entirely different. I mean, I'll use the Army. So when I came in as a second lieutenant of infantry and then transitioned out of the infantry into become special forces, at that time special forces wasn't a branch. So you could alternate between being light infantry and being special forces. When I came out of a combat tour in El Salvador, 87 to 88, they made special forces a branch. So they go, okay, Huber, you going to be an infantryman or you going to be a Green Beret? I said, both. I said, no, that was not part of read the test question, okay? And so I thought about that. I mean, I'm a major at the time. I go, okay, if given the privilege to command a battalion, which would I rather do? Would I rather have 750 infantrymen that I could fall out in the parking lot and go, gentlemen, follow me? Or would I want to be in charge of 18 12-man A teams over 3 different countries? And so the leadership perspective is different. And I said, I miss my Green Beret brethren for the rest of my life, but I want to remain an infantryman, and was privileged to command an infantry battalion in the 101st. Now you look at the Air Force, if you're a fighter pilot, you walk up to your aircraft. I suppose you may kick the tires, I don't know, okay? And you hop in that critter and you crank it up, and first of all, you didn't fuel it, you didn't arm it, you didn't maintain it. If it doesn't start, you probably get out and wait for them to give you one that does start. Your squadron command has a certain number of aircraft and a certain number of pilots, and then a bunch of people that always make sure that it's armed and maintained. But leadership is different that way. And in the Navy, I mean, it always used to amaze me. Personally, I think the Navy is the most independent thinkers of any of the service. And maybe that's because, you're out there bobbing along out in the ocean, and you literally, regardless of how big your ship is or what your rank is, you are in charge. And so I used to love it when I'd have admirals work for me. They probably didn't, but I thought it was great. And I'd think aloud, because that, to me, allowed people to get inside of my thought process, which I think is really important as a leader. First of all, you got to figure out that you're not the smartest person in the room. And second of all, you got to figure out that the diversity of your organization is its strength. And you should be humble enough to not care where the best idea comes from, but to only be concerned with doing the right thing for the right reason and making the best decision for the men and women that you serve. So I'd think aloud and I'd go, okay, here's what I'm thinking, here's my decision. And typically I'd have one of my 1 or 2 star admirals go, okay, General, we know you're in charge. We got that, you know. We can do the math. We got 1, you got 3. We know you're in charge, but did you ever think of it this way? And 99% of the time I'd go, no, I didn't think of it that way. I probably would have never have thought of it that way. And now that you say that, that's a really good idea, so let's do that. So the joint piece within the U.S. Armed Forces is getting easier. Most people recognize that you need each other. Most people hopefully have got beyond the arrogance of, gee, if you're not an airborne ranger, jump master, green beret, scuba diving, mean person, while you have no value in life, most people should go, wow, we got this huge mosaic. We need everybody to know their job, everybody to do their job. And you set the conditions so that people draw their self-worth from a successful team operation. You want everybody to be able to understand how they can contribute to that. So that's easier within the U.S. Armed Forces, but then you get into what your challenge is, and that is combined. So how do you do that with military of other nations? Because now you throw in not only the cultural impact, because each of the services has their own culture, but now you throw in the literal language. And so how do you understand what you're trying to say? Does it literally translate into their language? And that, I mean, that's really hard stuff. I always use the example of the Latin culture, which it amazes me that there's people in the United States of America that refuse to attempt to speak Spanish. I mean, there's nowhere in the United States you can go where people aren't speaking Spanish. If you learn another language, you get exposed to the richness of another culture. And maybe it'll even sink into your mind that, gee, maybe other cultures got good ways of doing stuff. You know, maybe it's just not us. But I use the example that in our culture, to tease someone, you pull their leg. If you were to take that concept of to pull your leg and literally translate it into Spanish, people wouldn't have any idea what you're talking about. Because that concept in Spanish says it's to pull your hair. So you can immediately break through those cultural barriers with other nations by speaking their language. A, that you're not an arrogant American that says, if you want to talk to me, you talk to me in my language. B, that you've demonstrated not only do you speak the language, but you understand the cultural context. So when I'm with Latins, I go, es imposible de bromear conmigo porque nadie puede tomar el pelo de un calvo. So I say, you can't joke with me because nobody can pull the hair of a bald person. Now, you probably can't understand multiple languages and multiple cultures, and then you run into the risk of using somebody else's voice box, linguists, to then issue. So first point is, when you're in a combined joint environment, you may be the commander on paper, but you're not in command. Other armed forces of other nations, not only do they have a different language and a different cultural context, but they've got other national caveats. When I commanded U.S. forces in Kosovo, I had a Russian battalion that worked for me. And yet there was a 2-star Russian general that I'd go to the Russian colonel as the commander and go, I want you to do this. And he'd go, you got to go talk to my 2-star boss, who then would talk with Moscow before they'd do anything. So you've got to appreciate that. And so how do you lead people in that environment? You lead them through demonstrating that you're a genuine leader. You lead them by demonstrating a commonality, a unity of purpose. In the combined joint interagency environment that you face, you will never have command. You can try and search for a unity of effort, a unity of purpose, but you're going to have to use your human dimension face to face, not voicemail, not Twitter, not Facebook, not email, not text, face to face of getting with someone that you don't understand their language, that you don't understand their culture, and convince them that you'll set the environment so that they can be successful and they need to contribute to your team effort. That is your challenge. And to do that, just like Captain Smith said, to do that, you've got to take the time to know them. To do that, you've got to figure out what is important to them. To do that, you've got to figure out what is their expectation of you. And I submit to you that I don't care what rank you are, what duty position you are. Every time you work with a new organization, it's the first day on the job. Everybody's wondering what insane ideas is this bald-headed 3-star going to bring into our organization. Oh my goodness, are we going to survive him trying to change the organization? Everybody faces that. Everybody's the newbie in the organization. And my advice to you, regardless if it's in times of peace or peacekeeping or combat, that people don't expect you to be perfect, but they demand that you be honorable. They demand that you be honest. They demand that you be humble. They demand that you listen to them and learn from them and lead them. They demand that you be willing to sacrifice your life for them. And that is the commonality. When people see you're genuine, when people see you care, and you're not arrogant or obnoxious or degrading or self-centered, or you're using this as a springboard for some other promotion or duty position, but that you're willing to learn from them, you're willing to lead them, you're willing to sacrifice for them, that is what breaches all language, all cultural barriers. And that you hold yourself to the same standards that you hold everyone else and higher. So I'm far much more entertaining face to face. That's not true. Those of you who are at a distance that can mute me, it's probably better. These people that are in the room, I have the privilege to know many of them, and I enjoy their company, and hopefully at some point in time it will be reciprocal. But thank you for allowing me to talk about some of my observations in my service to this nation. Thank you.
Thank you, General Huber. Let's give our speakers another round of applause. Well, we greatly appreciate taking time out of your schedules, gentlemen, to support Scabbard and Blade and the future of the military as a whole. I know our speakers see what potential this organization has to offer and the impact that we can make, but we can't make it happen without you, gentlemen, and the people that care about this organization. We may be small, but we're growing, and people like you that put their full support behind us really make a difference, so we appreciate it. Those of you at home and joining me here, this concludes the second annual Scabbard and Blade National E-Convention. We hope you all enjoyed it. I want to remind everyone of tomorrow's session, Saturday the 9th from 09 to 1200 Central Time. At a minimum, company commanders, potential company commanders, and advisors should be in attendance. A lot of what tomorrow's session entails will help your company set a solid foundation, as well as inform you all of what is to come for Scabbard and Blade. Please check your email for instructions as you did for this session. And remember, it does not matter what branch of service you associate with. United we stand and divided we fall. Thank you all. 5 stars.